Earlier on today at talkSPORT, Eddie Hearn
It went off,
came
Paul.
into the studio. Simon and Eddie
Sparks flew.
had a bit of a ding-dong. Eddie's been calling out Simon. Simon's been calling out Eddie. So Jim decided to get both of them in the same room to have it out. And they did that earlier on today. 10 o'clock tonight on BBC. 10 o'clock tonight on talkSPORT 2.
Oh, really?
Maybe they will take it as well.
BBC 2 as well.
Maybe they'll put it on there. on talkSPORT 2, you can hear the whole
mainstream
thing. Let's bring you just some of the highlights now.
I want you to answer this straight, Eddie. Can you in any way be proud of yourself in the way this entire affair was handled, particularly in fight week?
You've asked that question as well, and I've responded before. I think I made mistakes on a Wednesday. During this process, we let, and I keep going on about it, contractually, everything that we did was done with care and thought. I think nobody particularly handled the situation well, but I will say once again, when these tests come through, our governing body, we had conversations with them, and the conversations went something like this. Robert, I know you don't acknowledge VADA. We've been here before. But basically, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And 5 weeks later, they pulled the fight. Now, the other people say about my mistake of backing Conor Benn. I say this. I believe Conor Benn. There has been no benefit to me from a profile way or from a perceived integrity position to back Conor Benn. It would have been so easy for me just to cast him aside and say, well, I'm not sure, but I believe the young man. And I've stood
Do you
by
believe him still?
100%.
Still?
100%. I've sat with him. I've sat with his family. And by the way, no one can criticise me for that. Because let me tell you, it would have been so easy.
But you
wait,
hang
on,
Simon.
Just
hang
wait.
On.
You're the only person who loves the sound of his own voice more than me.
I don't know about that.
Well, it's true. But what I'm saying, Simon, is I've chosen to back this young man. I've taken flack. I've taken criticism. People have told me, don't do it. Distance yourself from it.
Is that because you can't get out of it now?
No. Mate, it would be easy for me to get out of it. I've done it because I believe in Jim. I've done it because I believe in the young man.
Did you want Conor to speak to Piers Morgan and talk TV?
No, I've not given Conor Benn.
Did you know he was going to do that?
Yes, I was made aware on the day that it was coming out.
The day?
Yep. I've not given Conor Benn one piece of advice from a media perspective, from a legal perspective, or anything. One thing I stand by is I've had this young kid in my office 3 dozen times. I've had his dad in my office. I've had Tony Sims in his office, and I believe him. And I stand by that.
What we're going to do at the moment, guys.
Conor Benn's lawyers issue a cease and desist against the British
Not
Boxing
that
Board
I've
of
seen.
Control? Well, I'm pretty sure that they did.
Oh, and you said you were putting pressure on the board,
Let's pay that
etc.
back from you, right? But the one question that you started this conversation with is what I would do in comparison to what you would do.
Ultimately, this fight could have happened. Could have happened. I made the decision for it not to happen. Now, Simon can say, it's because my dad told me so. Absolute rubbish. I sat there, I thought about it, I let the ego calm down, the madness calm down. And, when you talk about the money side, the 5 weeks that the board took to make the decision cost us £1 million. No problem. Like Simon says, we're big boys. I wish they would have made the decision straight away. And by the way, it would have been the correct decision.
So there we are, a brief excerpt of what was a 90-minute chat on air between Simon Jordan, Jim White and Eddie Hearn when he came into the studio. You can hear it all, as we said, on talkSPORT 2 tonight from 10, and it's also now on the talkSPORT YouTube channel, including all the behind-the-scenes footage as well. Gareth A. Davies from Fight Night, of course, Telegraph's boxing correspondent. Listen to it all unfold. Hi, Gareth.
Afternoon, Paul. Afternoon, Charlie.
So what did you make of the conversation?
Well, you can hear a lot more with myself and Nick Peet on talkSPORT 2 at 5 p.m, where we pick the bones out of that on Fight Night Extra, by the way, as well.
Right, okay.
Well, it was a long and very complex. Thank God Jim White was in there with them, frankly. No, really, because otherwise, without people,
they got down in the weeds, didn't they? I think it's fair to say, with acronyms.
I've got to be honest with you. There's very little in there that I didn't know before. They haven't spoken to. Or several of us have spoken to Eddie Hearn about before, other than him pronouncing he had regrets and that he'd made mistakes in that fight week in early October. He did make mistakes quite clearly. But even though he's going back on that, and the key thing is today, there was an argumentation. Those of us in the industry have had private conversations with Eddie Hearn. We've had a Chatham House Rules sit down with him. Half of it was Chatham House Rules. Half of it was public. Look, the thing is, he came out of that interview today, and it was entertaining as it was. You know, two big voices, very strong egos. You know, very articulate men, both of them, Jordan and Hearn, and very good at what they both do. But we've still, even though Eddie Hearn said he'd made mistakes in fight week, he's still making the same mistake, because he's told us that he's probably going to make Conor Benn against Chris Eubank in the UAE or in the USA on the 3rd of June. Conor Benn hasn't cleared his name. So he's been exonerated and didn't accept it from the World Boxing Council in a non-strict liability sense for the clomiphene test that showed up in his body with their testing process under VADA. They haven't answered the VADA test under UKAD and the Boxing Board of Control rules. So they're just marching on as if this hasn't happened and he's been exonerated. He hasn't had the strict liability test. He hasn't gone through a board testing system. You have to feel very uneasy about this fight taking place. About him coming back, about him not going in front of the board. Surely the thing to do still, which is what I was hoping Eddie would say today, is we've had a meeting, his 270-page document will go in front of the Boxing Board of Control, everything will be above board, and we'll go through it, and he can clear his name if he needs to, in the right way, like many other people have done in the past, or had their hearing, had their ban if they found him liable, whatever it is. It hasn't moved on in many ways. It was entertaining radio today. Simon's a great interviewer and a great kind of perspicacious, meticulous mind on these things. But it just shows that Eddie's got his line and he's sticking to it, that he blames the Boxing Board of Control. And he's probably right in that way, in his view, that they didn't act for 5 weeks when they'd known about this second test. There's all kinds of problems in this whole process. Plus, of course, we've spoken many times in the last 6 months, hidden behind legalese the whole time.
Ben Eubank, though, throughout all this, the next fight, when they fight, is the hottest ticket in town, surely.
If they fight, of course.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's the hottest ticket in town, but it's also the most controversial ticket in town. I think when fighters test positive for a banned substance, and I will remind you about this till I'm blue in the face, or even dark in the face, that the cradle of fight sports is that it's inherently dangerous and you need a drug testing policy, because you could be legally killed in the ring. Now, if things show up in your system that are performance enhancing drugs, you have to have that due procedure and that due process. We're not having it here. We're certainly not having it in this country. So it's being bypassed by loopholes for that fight to take place. So yes, it's a money-rich fight, a cash-rich fight for both the fighters and the promoters. But at the same time, it doesn't feel ethically right in that sense, that for it to go ahead without a hearing.
I don't think Chris Jr. would want to take that fight, would he, overseas? I don't think there's been any suggestion that he would go under another, walk up, because, reputationally that's not good. And I mean, look, it would be lucrative, but I'd like to think that wouldn't happen.
I think he would take it. And I think he will take it. I do, because I think there's big money on the table. He's just lost to Liam Smith at whatever the negotiations are around this. We've also been teased that Kell Brook's in training and he could face Conor Benn next. We've also been teased that Manny Pacquiao is available. All of those fights presumably would take place abroad, because Eddie said what he won't do is license Conor Benn under an external jurisdiction or commission to have the fight here, to go against the Boxing Board of Control in that way. It's a right royal mess. It's bigger than Conor Benn, this story. It's bigger than Eddie Hearn. It's a big issue that's hung over boxing for the last 6 months. And I don't know if it's going to be kind of solved anytime soon. So, Eddie Hearn will be more concerned at the moment in the next week and a half about Anthony Joshua performing well against Jermaine Franklin, which I hasten to add is live on talkSPORT on April the 1st.
Yes, he did talk about that. So for people who want to tune in, and I'm sure you'll play some excerpts of it. You say you're back at 5 on talkSPORT too, you and Nick Pete, yeah? Yeah,
we are picking the bones out of all of that, looking at Conor Benn's situation, the heavyweight showdown, as it's been called, between Eddie Hearn in the studio with White and Jordan, looking back on UFC 286, Leon Edwards retaining his UFC welterweight crown, looking at Kell Brook back, and whether we really are a couple of days away from the Fury Usyk fight being announced for the undisputed heavyweight crown.
Good stuff, Gareth. Thanks very much.
Gareth.
Pleasure, gents.